everyone, and thank you for joining us on this Wednesday evening. We're talking about landscaping with native plants. As Natalie said, I am the Natural Resources Manager over at the Grove for the last 5 years, but I recently took a new position with Lake Forest Open Lands. I've been in the ecological restoration field since 2008, so I think that's going on 13 years. So I've worked extensively with native landscapes, but I just became a homeowner for the first time, and I have not landscaped with native plants too much before, and I have my chance. I'm very excited to give this presentation a little later down the road and show my own pictures of my own house and what I've done with the place. But I'll tell you what I do know about them and try to answer all your questions. I have some plants as suggestions that we'll go over in a little bit. And I might run through those a little quick just to make sure that we have enough time for questions. Okay. So what is a native plant? Well, it's anything that evolved here. People typically think of wildflowers when they think of, the tall grass prairies. You might think of native shrubs or trees, but an important aspect to the landscape are grasses and sedges. They can add an important contribution to structure and texture to your garden. You might be thinking, well, in my garden, I've never specifically planted natives, so is what I'm doing for the environment wrong or bad? And the answer to that is not necessarily. A lot of non-native plants can provide some type of ecological benefit, providing nectar and pollen to the pollinators. The thing you have to watch out for is if a plant is invasive. And that is something that a lot of invasive plants come from homeowners' gardens because they can be very beautiful, and then they just escape and take all over our wild places. So what makes a plant invasive? It spreads really easily through seed. It might have rapid root growth, which allows it to spread underground. And some of them even may contain phytochemicals, which are detrimental to seed germination or the growth of other plants. And sometimes they even affect the native fauna. So buckthorn has shown to cause tumors in amphibians. So things like that, you really have to watch out for. And if you're wondering, well, how do I know if my plants are invasive? Most states and even down to the county level may have invasive species lists that you can kind of keep track of. And if you do have some on your property, I would advise you to get rid of them accordingly. Glenview does have quite a few nasty ones out there, and they can be difficult to get rid of, but if you have questions about that, just ask. Let's move on. Why should we landscape with native plants? Well, the number one reason is because Illinois prairies and woodlands have been deeply fragmented through urbanization, and just, we've cut everything down, plowed everything under. So that means that flying insects and birds and pollinators, they don't always have a reliable food source. They don't have the plants that they need. The natural places that we do have a lot of the times have been highly degraded, which is why it's important for people to get interested in ecological restoration, just to help to restore those and bring those native plants back and thriving, because these animals rely on them. So if you do have native plants in your garden, you might be thinking, well, it's just a small spot. Is it really going to make a difference? And the answer is yes, it really truly is. You're giving those animals another stopping point for wherever they're going. Sometimes they might hang out there a little longer, which would be great. So some insects are dependent, like fully dependent on certain plant species. we're going to go through a couple of those in the slideshow, but oaks in general, which are in a pretty good decline, they're a keystone species, and about 500, I think specifically 534 species that we know of are supported by the genus of oaks. So native plants are important. Let's keep them going. So if you want to plant a tree, plant an oak tree in your yard. Native plants are tolerant to environmental conditions, you know, our long, hot summers that are dry. They've evolved here, so they're used to it. They're used to, you know, late April snowfalls. They're also less susceptible to diseases and pests, having been in the area for a long time. Unless something is brought in, they can typically handle things. Because of these things, you are going to save yourself time and money, because you aren't going to have to buy, you know, any oils that might treat the pests, or, you know, have to foliar or spray your plants to prevent the diseases. You're going to save on watering. Once these plants become established, they really don't need too much maintenance after that. You might have to divide them once in a while. You might have to trim them back if you so choose, but they really low maintenance, especially if you like that wild look. So where do you get native plants? Well, somebody already asked about the Grove's native plant sale, which is taking place May 22nd for pre-orders only. So no walk-ins are going to be allowed this year due to COVID. But lots of other places have native plant sales as well. I'm from Lake County. I know Lake County puts on a big one every year. The Open Lands Associations do as well. I'm sure Friends of the Forest Preserve District have their own plant sales. So if you kind of just look around the area, I'm sure that you will find plenty to choose from. You can also go from native plant nurseries. Prairie Moon Nursery is a huge one. I've used them extensively in the past. Midwest Ground Covers is also very good. And then you have like Taylor Creek, which you can buy seeds from. So you can get native plants either in plug form, which is like a small baby plant, or you can get actual seeds. So it's kind of up to you and what kind of style you're looking for, what you want to deal with. I would advise against buying native plants from some of the big name stores. Sometimes they'll have like a little native plant section. And the reason why I would be wary of that is because you don't know if those seeds were treated with anything. Neonicotinoids are something that are causing a concern with the bee populations. It's used as a seed treatment, and then as that seed develops, that neonicotinoid goes into every part of the plant and it stays there. So in the pollen and the nectar, you know, it gets into the food source. So you want to stay away from those, but also when you're using those big name stores, you don't really know where these plants are coming from. So even though it may be a coneflower that looks just like the Illinois coneflower, it could be from out west, and the environmental conditions that it's been derived from might be very different. So if you want something that's going to hold up to Illinois, know where you're sourcing your plants and seeds. Okay. So what do you want to plant? This is the fun part. Well, you gotta check out your site. Sun, shade, do you have both? What kind of soils do you have? Are they clay? Are they sandy? If they're clay, they're typically gonna hold more water and be kind of a pain to deal with. Sandy soils allow for better drainage, but you know, it's you kind of want loam. If you got loam, you're golden. But check out what kind of soils you have, and then you could amend them accordingly. How much space do you have? Do you have acres and acres of, you know, prairie that you want to restore, or do you just have, you know, a little plot of land in your Chicago yard? Anything can work. So just think about what you have. And then when you think about the aesthetics of your garden, you want to think about how often or when things bloom. So you want to have things that bloom in the spring all the way through fall, and then, you know, fun stuff in between, like fall color. The different plant structures, the way their leaves are arranged can sometimes add a really cool style to that garden. And winter aesthetic, native plants can look pretty cool in the winter. A lot of people cut them back, but if you leave them up, they can provide some winter interest. All right, so we're going to get started talking about different situations and the plants that would be good for them. So Illinois has a lot of wetlands, especially in the Chicagoland area. So you might have flooding that happens in your yard. This might be a perfect place to put in a rain garden. So rain gardens help filter pollutants from the runoff, from, you know, water coming down from the street. It recharges groundwater, it can reduce flooding potential, and it creates habitat. I will tell you, it does not create mosquito habitat because the water doesn't last long enough in the rain gardens. So I'll explain this a little bit more in detail. So in a minute. But if you're going to start a rain garden, you kind of want to see where your stormwater goes and where it gathers in your yard. You can fill that hole up with water just to see how long it takes to drain. An ideal rain garden has water that drains within 24 hours, which is the reason why mosquitoes don't get established. Mosquitoes require about 7 to 12 days of standing water for a larva to develop. So if it drains quickly, don't worry about the mosquitoes. So when you're digging your rain garden, I have this little diagram here that you kind of fill in the depression with soil. And if you're on a slope, you create a little berm on the downside of the slope so things don't fall out. But you want to avoid utility lines. You want to be sure that it's at least 10 feet away from your foundation. So kind of just be cognizant of where this rain garden is going. You don't want it up against the house, and you need to figure out where your lines are, since you will be kind of digging it out a little bit. And then figure out what your light situation is. You know, you already know that your soils are going to be wet sometimes. So you kind of know that you're going to be dealing with wetland plants. And then if it's shady, pick plants for the shade. If it's sunny, pick plants for the sun. You don't want to put mismatched plants in mismatched locations. You want to kind of match them up, otherwise they're not going to thrive. So we'll explore what to put in your rain garden. Blue flag iris is a really nice one. This is kind of a common one that you might see in the landscape in general. Grows about 3 feet tall. It likes full to part sun, wet to medium soil, so it can withstand those drier times when your rain garden is not full of water. And it blooms May through July. There is a yellow flag iris that is invasive, and why? I can't exactly say because it looks just like the blue flag iris. It just spreads a lot more aggressively. It spreads through not only its seed, but also its rhizomatous roots. So it kind of bullies out wetlands. So please don't put that in your landscape. Go for the blue flag iris. There are other cultivar irises that you can use that aren't quite as a bully as the yellow one is. So just do research. It's the best I can say. It's funny that this plant came next because ironweed is one of the most beautiful plants. I think it's just stunning. It has this great magenta color that's like almost three-dimensional. It's just really beautiful, if that makes sense. But it likes fold apart sun. It grows up to 6 feet tall. It usually doesn't get that tall though, I'm just telling you. But it could if the soil conditions are right. It likes medium to wet. It grows, or it blooms July through September. It is the host plant to the American painted lady butterfly. It can be aggressive. It can be one of those bully plants where in a smaller setting, it can kind of shoulder its way through, but it's so beautiful. I think that's okay. And it is native, so I don't mind if it's an aggressive native. So blue vervain, this one has seeds that are a staple for many mammals and birds. It grows about 4 feet tall. Sometimes it can grow a little bit taller, but medium to wet soils, fold apart sun, blooms July through September. You can see in the picture on the left, you can see its leaf habit, the structure of the plant, which is, it has a nice structure. It's really pretty. And the flowers are pretty dainty, but when they bloom in mass like that, they provide a nice pop of color.
Hey, Meredith.
Uh-huh.
We just have one question. How tall is ironwood? You said it was large, but how tall can it get again?
It can get up to 6 feet, but I've rarely seen it that tall. I'll see it at, 4, maybe 5 feet, but it usually doesn't get taller than that.
Okay.
The heights that I put on here are should be the absolute highest. Unless you have really great soil, and then plants can get on steroids. So lobelias, we have on the right, the great blue lobelia, and on the left, the cardinal flower. Both of these are between 3 and 4 feet. They're typically on the shorter side. They bloom later in the season, so July through October. They like those wet to medium soils. So all of these plants, are great for the rain garden. Remember that, because they can tolerate the wet, but they can also kind of not totally dry out, but have that medium soil component. They like fold apart sun. These are great for hummingbirds and butterflies. And they can contain lobeline, which is a compound that supposedly deters herbivores like deer. I find this slightly questionable because I have seen deer feed, at least on the great blue lobelia. But I don't know, maybe our deer were super hungry. So be wary of that. The literature says that it is deer and rabbit resistant, but something is eating it. So swamp milkweed is a very nice one as well. It is the larval host of monarch and swallowtail butterflies. It has vanilla scented flowers. This one is deer resistant. I never see this one with any browse on it. Grows up to 4 feet tall, wet to medium soils, fold apart sun. And it is also a little bit of a later bloomer. It blooms from July to October. Sedges are a great component to rain gardens. They have, people look at grasses, and sedges are triangular. They kind of look like grasses, but they have a triangular stem. And people look at these plants, and if they're not in bloom, they kind of look like grass. People don't get very excited. But when they're in flower, they can be extremely beautiful. Some of them are just so graceful and sweet. So I would definitely add them to your landscape. There's, gosh, I don't know how many species in Illinois. I think it's 60. So there's a lot to choose from. They grow in woodlands, wetlands, prairies. So no matter what your situation is, there's definitely a sedge for you. So here are some that I just, they go in order. So fox sedges over here, porcupine sedges in the middle, and offroot sedge is on the right, just to give you guys examples. Okay, so prairies. Prairies are one of my favorite ecosystems. These really are very beautiful. I never realized it as a kid until I got to walk through one, and the smells and the colors are just phenomenal. But what makes up a prairie is that it has less than 10% canopy cover, so it's wide open and sunny. And we all know that we are the prairie state, and we lost a huge portion of our Illinois prairies. So if we can give these plants a little bit more room to grow on our own land, our private land, that's the best thing that we could do. So there's coneflowers. The one here on the left is Polita, and this more robust one over here on the right is Purpurea. So they're pretty similar. If you just look on the left, the Polita it's typically a little more pale. This picture doesn't, you can see it in the background, those pale petals. And then their petals are also a lot narrower, so they're not as robust looking. But these plants like full sun. They can grow in part sun, but they prefer the full. Medium soils, so not too wet, not too dry. Purpurea can tolerate moisture soils, so you're kind of like in between, not too wet, but you can go for Purpurea. And there is the Otto skipper that feeds on the foliage of these plants. They're both 3 to 4 feet, and Polita blooms in June through July, and Purpurea blooms July through September. So Polita blooms a little bit earlier, and Purpurea blooms a little bit later. So if you grow them both, you can have that beautiful bloom for quite some time.
We have a question from the chat. This is actually about sedges. Someone said that sedges seem to be invasive in their yard, and they're just wondering how to control them.
So yes, there is yellow nut sedge that can be invasive, at least weedy for sure. I would say if you are not opposed to herbicides, you might want to try herbiciding it. We've tried digging them out in the past, and that can work okay. But depending on the area, I would use different techniques. So if you're dealing with it a lot, I would use an herbicide. If it's growing in your lawn, that's going to be a little tricky just because it might kill off some grass. So hand pulling might be an option. It's just important to get that root out as best you can. So if it's not in your turf, you might be able to smother it either with a lot of mulch or black plastic. So you could see if any of those options work for you.
Okay, great.
Cool. Coreopsis. We have 2 species here. We have palmata, which grows very short. It's only about 2 feet high. So that can be very nice. It is tolerant of poor soils. So if you have some, not great, locations, this plant, might be able to do pretty well over there. It also takes drier soils as well. So if you have like clay, that needs to be broken up, really kind of dry and awful, I would use that plant. It is deer resistant. Blooms June through August, so a nice long bloom time. Both of these plants grow in full sun and medium to dry soils. this Coreopsis tripteris, and I'm giving you the scientific names because if you want to look up these plants, you can actually look specifically for them. Otherwise, you might get something from another part of the country and you won't know that it's native to Illinois. But Coreopsis tripteris is another one that is tall and it can take over a little bit. I don't think it gets crazy, but it has just the sweetest little flower. This one always makes me smile when I see it. And a really nice scent to its blooms. So I added that one, but Palmata might be a little more well-behaved in a garden situation.
Couple questions.
Okay.
We have one question asking if you could explain the difference, if any, from like a full sun to partial sun plant. Guess just trying to plan for what to best put in a position or.
Sure. So a full sun is typically like 8+ hours a day of sunlight, and a part sun would be like 4 to 6 hours of sunlight a day. And then a shade would be, you know, minimal, maybe when the sun comes through the leaves of the tree. Maybe it gets morning sun or something like that. So hopefully that helps.
So if you just check your yard at different times of the day, you can usually kind of eyeball it and figure it out. Like
yeah,
something's getting. Okay.
Definitely.
And then one more question. Somebody is wondering if any of these plants are edible.
Well, Echinacea purpurea, that purple coneflower we just saw, that's a medicinal plant. Gosh, you know, I haven't experimented with eating my native plants. I think I heard that the roots of blue plant, I'm not gonna say that because I don't really know for sure. A lot of native plants are edible. Sometimes you have to prepare them in a certain way to get rid of any toxins that there might be, or like tannins, you know, something that's undesirable to eat. And a lot of wildflower books talk about that. So if you want to pick one up, you might be able to see something for that. Also, there's edible wild plant books, and that talks more extensively about it. But yeah, there's a lot, but I don't think any of the ones that I've specifically talked about yet. Any other questions so far?
I think we're good for now. Thanks.
Okay. So now we're going on to the Rudbeckia species. I should have put black-eyed Susans up here because that's the common name for these guys. So I will say that again. These are black-eyed Susans or brown-eyed Susans. They're the Susan family. But there's Rudbeckia hirta and Rudbeckia subtomentosa, which is a fun one to say. But they both like full to part sun and a variety of soils, but they don't like it fully wet. So medium, maybe medium wet, and then dry. So hirta, which honestly, they look practically identical. So I can't tell you if this one's hirta or this one is because they look pretty much the same, except for their height and when they bloom. So hirta is 2 feet tall, while subtomentosa is between 2 and 5 feet tall. So it grows a little bit taller. I don't think I've ever seen it 5 feet tall. It typically grows maybe around 3. But hirta blooms early in June, and it kind of blooms and then it might bloom again later in August. So it's more of like a cool, I guess August is hot, but it kind of has those multiple blooming times. So early in the summer and then later in the summer. Subtomentosa blooms August through October, and these are both high value to pollinators. And then there's butterflyweed. This is in the milkweed family as well. It grows about 2 feet tall, maybe a little bit taller. It likes full sun, dry soils, blooms June through August. This may be slow to come up in the spring because it has a very long taproot. So if you get like a plug of this and you plant it, you know, let's say in fall, and then in the spring, you're waiting for it. You're not going to see it right away because it does have a very long taproot. So don't think that it's dead. Just be patient because it is very beautiful. Since it is in the milkweed family, it attracts monarchs. It has that bright orange color and it's just really pretty. So I talked about grasses and sedges and keeping them in your landscape. So this is prairie dropseed. It's full to part sun. It excels in hot, dry conditions. It forms this really nice tussock. So a lot of grasses kind of just spread all over the place. This stays nice and tight in these little clumps, and it's like hair. It's really cool. And then in the late summer, it puts up these are its flower heads, and then they turn to seeds that look similar, and they smell like buttered popcorn, which I don't care for, but a lot of people do. Some people say it also smells like cilantro, which I've never gotten that from it, but to each their own. It has a nice golden fall color, which you can kind of see in the picture on the left, starting to come in after it sets seed. And the tussocks are only about 2 feet tall, so not too crazy. All right, so I'm going to try to run through these a little bit quicker just so we have times for questions. So woodlands, savanna / woodland, anything savannas of Illinois were 10 to 50% canopy cover, while the woodlands were 50 to 80% canopy cover. So the plants that I'm going to talk about take shade and part shade. If you are looking for a ground cover, wild ginger is a great one. It maintains its leaf throughout the growing season. It comes up in the spring, so a lot of spring plants kind of die back pretty quick. This stays green all season long. It is deer resistant. It only grows 6 inches tall and it spreads pretty well. So great ground cover. Then it has this little purple flower, which is really important to ants. This is another one of my favorites. This is bellwort. Super sweet. It has like a little ballerina skirt. Full to part sun, or sorry, shade to part sun in medium soils. It's about 12 inches tall, so just a foot. And it blooms April through May, so it's an early bloomer. And I would actually put till June. It probably goes till June. I think April to May is a bit early. It's great for native bees since it's one of the earlier blooming plants. It's awesome. It's a really nice one. This is wild hyacinth. It is full to part sun, medium soils. It is also about 2 feet tall. Blooms May through June. It can tolerate clay soils if adequate moisture is available. Okay, this one's my favorite, my for sure favorite. This is liverwort, and a lot of people named plants based on areas of the body they thought the plant could help cure. So liverwort, this plant was thought to help heal the liver. And if you look at the leaves, I think it's the color and the texture that supposedly looks like liver. I'm not really sure about that. But it's medium to medium dry soils, shade to part shade. It grows about 6 inches. It's a pretty low growing plant. Flowers can be white, pink, purple, or blue, and just so sweet. They come up really early, right up out of the leaves, and they're just so adorable. I got this from the Prairie Moon Nursery. John Burroughs, the famous 19th century American naturalist once said, "There are many things left for May, but nothing fairer, if as fair as the first flower, the Hepatica. It is certainly a gem of the woods," and it truly is. It is just stunning. Wild Columbine, same shade, part sun, 2 feet tall. Variety, well, okay, so this one actually is a variety of sun and soil conditions. So it can grow in full sun, to shade, and then moist to dry soils. Getting ahead of myself here. Attracts pollinators and hummingbirds due to the shape of its flower and its larval host. It's a larval host plant of the Columbine duskwing, which you can see up in this corner here. All right, I'm almost done with the plants, I promise. Hyssop, you got the Agastaches. So the one here on the left is a little bit taller. It is about 6 feet tall, so usually more about 4 or 5. The one over here is about 3. They both bloom late summer into fall, so they attract late pollinators and also hummingbirds as well. These are really great for finches, and they are deer resistant. Okay, so now we're getting on to shrubs. Shrubs are pretty important. People, when they plant shrubs, they usually like the ornamental shrubs, you know, things that aren't native, but there are a lot of really beautiful native shrubs. So Meadowsweet is one. It is, so it is the host plant for the New England buck moth. And likes full to part sun. This is a good one to put in your rain garden because it likes wet to medium wet soils. It's about 4 feet tall, so it doesn't get too crazy high. Blooms July, August, September. So that's a nice one. That's really good. Chokecherry, there's different varieties of this one with different colored berries. These are black, some are red. They're Aronia species. So check those out individually. But they're an all-season plant. They have these beautiful flowers, then they have these beautiful fruits, and they have really nice fall color as well. They're about 3 to 10 feet tall, depending on what species you get. And they hold up to drought once established. New Jersey tea has fragrant white flowers, attracts butterflies and hummingbirds. Has yellow twigs in the winter and can withstand drought as well. This one is also a nitrogen fixer, so it can help provide nutrients to your soil, especially if they're poor. That might be a good thing. Pagoda Dogwood, I'm showing you this picture on the left because you can see it can get a little wily looking, but with a little pruning, it can look a little nicer, and you can actually make it look nicer than that. It has kind of like this horizontal branching, which you can kind of see in this picture. But this one can be planted as a specimen tree or as a screening plant. It grows up to 15 to 25 feet, so it can get up to like a small tree size. Fragrant white flowers, has black berries, as you can see, with these bright pink red bracts, which kind of add a nice interest to it. It's a burgundy red fall color. This one does prefer acidic soils, but you can amend your soils if you don't have them. It does best in part shade and is better protected from the wind.
Are the berries edible?
Oh, I forgot to mention that. For dogwoods, I don't think you want to eat them, but for the Aronia, the choke berries, they are. And there's one specific species that have really good berries. And I forgot which one that was. I don't think it was the blackberry one. I'd have to think about it. But yes, the choke berries have edible, and they're all edible. It's just one is a little bit sweeter than the other two. But dogwoods, I don't think so. Winterberry, is just really cool. This one, the berries are very much edible for birds. They absolutely love them. So it grows in full apart shade, moist to wet soils. So I wouldn't necessarily put it in your rain garden. I just don't feel like it would like fit. Yeah, aesthetically speaking, but you could, I guess. It holds up well to occasional flooding. It just doesn't look like a typical rain garden. But it grows 6 to 10 feet tall with yellow fall color, these bright red berries, and they do persist through the winter until they all get eaten. And more than 20 species of birds feed on this fruit. So if you're a birder, this one might be for you. They're best in acidic soil. You do need male and female plants for berry production, and one male can pollinate up to 5 to 6 females. But it does take 3 years, it's a lot of numbers coming at you, for people at the nursery to discern if it's a male plant or a female plant. So just keep that in mind. This can be planted as, it's too small. Well, you could probably plant it as a specimen tree, but you can also use it as a screen. There's a lot of cultivars available for this one, for like different fall colors, and I'm assuming the amount of berries. All right, Baptisia, wild indigo. This is not really a shrub. It just kind of looks like a shrub, so I put it here. But this is more of a prairie plant, full sun, dry to mesic soil, dry to medium soils. It attracts the wild indigo duskwing here. It's available in different colors, so you can have the white, you can have the blue, purple, bluish purple, and you can have the yellow. They all produce these really cool seed pods that do last throughout the winter, so that gives you a really good winter aesthetic. The reason why it's not a shrub is because these stems are not woody. This is all an herbaceous plant, so it will sprout from the ground in the springtime, and you can cut it back if you so choose. All right.
About what these shrubs, are they deer resistant? Or I guess which ones are deer resistant and which ones are not?
The wild indigo, not being a true shrub, is deer resistant. New Jersey tea is deer resistant. And I think that's it. Yeah. But there are other native plants that are deer resistant, for shrub speaking. So if you go on to like the Morton Arboretum website or the Chicago Botanic Gardens website, they typically have a list of deer resistant plants just because deer can be a problem. I know working at the Grove in Glenview, they're everywhere. So if you live anywhere near the Grove, you probably have a lot of deer. So check out those plant lists, and they might be able to give you some shrubs that I didn't mention here. Anything else so far?
Let's see, the chokeberry, was that for sun or shade?
That is for sun to shade, part sun, part shade.
Okay.
It can kind of do well in both, but not fully one or the other.
Okay.
So like I said, I don't have my own native plant garden yet, but I will. And it was harder to come across some pictures. Some of the what I used were from friends' landscapes. But you know, you can kind of plant them in mass in front of your house in a certain garden bed, or you can kind of just pepper them in with, you know, your more ornamental plants. You don't have to have just all out natives. You know, you can definitely have a mix of both. The only thing is make sure if they're not native that they're not invasive. So you can kind of pepper them in, or you can kind of get a big mix together here's another picture of a rain garden. So I kind of have this situation in front of my house. I hope my town lets me do this, but you can kind of just mix them all together. Or like I said, make it more formal looking. And with that said, if you want it more formal looking, just really think about the heights of the plants, when they bloom, and then the different textures. You know, some soft plants versus some stiff, you know, tall plants. It all adds to the aesthetic. So I'm going to give you some tips. If you want to really establish your native plants, before you do that, get rid of your weeds. It's gonna make things harder. If you're constantly pulling weeds, you might, you know, not be familiar with native plants, and you might, you know, be pulling the wrong thing. You're not gonna give your native plants necessarily enough room to kind of, native plants, some of them need nice spaces in order to thrive. Some of them can tolerate disturbed sites, and some of them cannot. So to make their transition more easeful, eradicate the weeds. And it'll make your life easier too, because then you're not constantly battling that. To do that, you want to go through a whole growing season of getting rid of them. So if you're not opposed to herbicides, you can do a cycle of spraying the herbicide. And I will say that if you're doing it for the purpose of planting native plants and you're kind of going through it, it's kind of like a one-time deal where you're not going to be spraying every year. You're just doing it for the initial process. That could, you know, herbicides, nobody thinks they're great. So that can alleviate some of your concern about that. And then what you're doing for the pollinators and, you know, is more impactful in the long run. Otherwise, if you are very opposed to herbicides, you can put a layer of thick mulch on, I would say about 8 to 12 inches of mulch will kill things off. You can also use black plastic. That typically takes at least 6 weeks. So you have options there, but get rid of your weeds as best you can. Keep away from the tall prairie grasses. So Indian grass, big blue are really beautiful. I love them. I think they're great, but I also know that they like to take over, push things out. They got a strong root system. So just be cognizant of that. If you want a more formal garden look, use actual plants, not seed. If you just take a handful of seeds and throw them out, you're going to get, you know, a big mix of stuff. So it's pretty common sense. The aggressive plants that I spoke about, unless you absolutely love them, like I do, use them in large areas. So if you are going to convert your whole backyard and you need some space to fill, or some plants to fill in a space, sure, you can use those aggressive ones. But if you're dealing with small areas, keep the ones that, you know, behave themselves. And use the plants where they're intended. If they like sun, put them in the sun. If they like shade, put them in the shade. If you kind of mix those things up, they're not going to survive, or they might get really leggy and kind of just look goofy. So keep that in mind. Really figure out where those plants like to be and put them there. All right, that's all I have for my slideshow. And we have 8 minutes. So.
Okay, I am gonna allow people to talk now. We're going to loose the floodgates.
All right.
Let's see. I'm gonna just go through and click on the button. You may not be able to talk if you've got an older version of Zoom, so I apologize for that. If you're not able to do that, that's just for that reason. Sometimes it gives me this little error message. Let me go through here. There are a lot of people here, so I'm just gonna go through this one by one. And if you want to ask a question, you could unmute yourself and ask, or you could raise your hand and I can call on you. Let's see, let me just finish doing all this. I think Joni's been waiting for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm confused because I'm in the Glenview Gardner. And I'm confused about, because I thought we were going to be at the Grove on May 22nd. Now in the brochure for the plant swap. And it also says that the brochure with the same week as your program's listed, that there's going to be one at the library at in the patio.
So,
Both
so
both?
the Grove,
the same.
so the Grove plant sale and the plant swap we're having at the library are different things. We sort of set them up separately, and if they're happen to be on the same day, then that's what they are. But the plant swap is it's sort of limited. It's what the library is doing. It's on the south patio, and let me turn on my video. It's on the south patio, and it's sort of spots are limited. It's just for people to come and like swap plants with other gardeners. But like I said, you have to sign up for that one on our website. The plant sale is separate. That's at the Grove. Okay.
Who is selling the plant?
I'm sorry.
Who is selling the plant at the Grove?
It's the GHA, the Grove Heritage Association.
But so they are on the same day? They're both the 22nd? Does
I
anybody
think they are.
Yeah, I know that the plant sale, you can pick up your plants over the period of a few hours. So I don't know what time the plant swap is going on, but we're pretty close to each other. I'm sure you can swing by the library and then come pick up plants at the Grove.
Well, if
And have them ordered.
we're supposed to be organizing it, planning, helping with that, and you gardeners. More than
This
just
is,
stopping by. We have to be at one or the other. Okay.
The
Not the same day though. It's the date that I'm concerned about.
it's the 22nd, right, Meredith?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're
And
both-
what are the hours for the
both-
plant sale then?
no, it's pre-sales only.
Yeah.
Orders are due May 1 to the Grove Heritage Association.
Okay.
Thank you, Burl.
You're
Oh,
welcome, Meredith.
so we order them from the sale. I think we need more explanation from that somewhere about the Grove one.
Burl, where is that advertised?
It's on
Yeah,
It's on the website.
the Grove website. If they will email burlbills@comcast.net, I will send them the information. I'll
but
put it
it's
in the,
not, but it's not in the brochure or published anywhere. No signs in the library. Okay.
Yeah, the park district and the library, I don't think are very connected.
Well, is the Grove part of the park district then, huh?
The
Yeah.
Grove is part of the park district.
Well, then it should be in the park district brochure.
It should be. Mhm.
I didn't see it there at all. Okay. I'll have to look. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for the confusion.
Yeah.
Coordinate better next spring.
Well,
Thanks. It helped. You can mute
Okay.
me. I'll shut up.
Okay, so let's see here. Second. So does anybody else have a question?
I have a question.
Okay.
I am new to a native garden, so this is my second full year. It'll be my second full year, and I've heard cut it down, not cut it down. You know, is there? I mean, I left it up because it was pretty during the winter, and now I have cut it all the way down. Could you just explain a little bit like what to do for that?
yeah, definitely. So if you want to cut it down in the fall, by all means, cut it down in the fall. But like you said, it added some winter aesthetic to your yard. So I would leave it if you like it. Also, a lot of insects burrow into the hollower, the plant species with the hollower stems, and they hibernate there. So that's probably why you get a lot of leave it, because those insects are using it. So in the springtime, once temperatures are consistently like above about 50 degrees, you can definitely cut it and remove that old vegetation if you don't want it, which you probably don't because it can accumulate. So I would say leave it, but if you don't like it, you can cut it down. If it's not, not all the native plants can provide that hibernation aspect, but there are things you can do in your yard that help.
So it has nothing to do with it growing back the next year. It's all about aesthetics and plant hibernation for the animal, for the critters.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Unless you're cutting like a shrub down, don't do that. But even that would, most likely rejuvenate.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think Claudia has her hand up. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, thank you. This has been great. Thanks so much. I'm wondering, did you have any sun-loving ground cover that's native to the guest?
Yeah, okay. I was going to include that, and I just felt like I was getting a little lengthy. So there is, oh gosh, Ruella. Oh, hold on. Let me just look up the common name really quick. Sometimes I get stuck on the scientific. Has a really common, oh gosh. Okay. Oh, wild petunia. I knew it had like a common flower name. Wild petunia. That one really loves the sun and it likes kind of uncomfortable situations. So like really hot situations. So it's great for those drier areas. It might be a little slow to get established, but once it does, it seeds pretty readily. So it can be aggressive, but that makes a good sunny ground cover for sure. And it has a long bloom time as well. It lasts several months.
Okay, I'm going to go through some of the questions from the chat.
Really quick, I will also mention, if you go on to Prairie Moon Nursery's website, they have specific categories. So I'm pretty sure they do have a ground cover category. So, I gave you one idea, but they'll give you, a few more.
We have a question. How do you choose the right fertilizer?
I didn't mention this. You don't need a fertilizer. Not for native plants. If you put them in the right soil conditions, they'll be good. And some of the native plants are like nitrogen fixers. So you can add nitrogen to your soil organically through those plants. Baptisia is one. One of the shrubs is
talking to you.
Here's
Just muted.
I don't know if somebody's talking, but New Jersey tea is also a nitrogen fixer. So that can help. And then also if you don't cut your plant, okay, here's another reason why you can leave your plants in the garden over the winter is because they'll start to break down and they'll add more nutrients to the soil. But you don't need to help them grow if you stick them in the right conditions. They'll do it on their own.
Okay, I think that covers it for the chat questions. Let's see, any other questions from people? You can raise your hand or put it in the chat or unmute yourself.
Thank you. Are you, you work from the Grove or the library?
I work from the Grove.
And I'm from the library.
And we just
partnered together.
So That's why you should have gotten this seat. So, but you're in the library now.
Yes.
That's the library bathroom. Okay. We'll probably see you around. Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Very
I
well.
have one more thing to share. It's a resource. It's just like sort of a nice native plants guide with links to information about those plants, and it sort of separates it into, you know, sun to part sun, part shade, stuff like that. It offers, it's a pretty big list. So, you know, what we couldn't cover today, you know, it might be on that list, but hopefully, you know, there's just some, you know, what Meredith went over was some really great examples of how to add native plants to your garden. I know I've definitely wrote down a few myself that I just wasn't sure about before. Yeah, so let's see. Last questions, last chance.
Nobody?
Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope I was informative for you guys. And yeah, the plants I showed you were just an example of, you know, the beauty that can be found. And if you don't know about them, you know, you're not going to use them. So I just wanted to show the diversity that there is out there and give you guys an idea of what you can plant at your own house.
Oh, I have another question. Bee balm, Monarda, is that native?
Oh, yes. Yes, that one is. I see it used so much that I mean, some of, yeah, I could have added it. It's a great one. Pollinators love it.
Yeah. Nice colors.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks very much for coming, everyone. Meredith, thank you.
Thank you, Natalie, for coordinating all this.
All right. And I'm going to stop recording now.